horrific childhood trauma that I basically ignored until my late 40s. And when I went through the therapy, 1 year, 3 therapeutic journeys, and was no longer suicidal and could see a future for myself, and was no longer hyper vigilant that, the universe was after me. I thought it was important to share my story because of the stigma that surrounds psychedelics. And that's why we're chatting today. I like to continue having this conversation with folks.
And I think it's a conversation that needs to be had because maybe some people think there's only one way to treat something. Let's say PTSD, right?
Mhm.
There's only one way to treat a fall. There's only one way to treat a breakup, right? But you mentioned that you gone through it, and you mentioned suicidal thoughts. And one thing that I learned about suicidal thoughts is there's a lot of people who have those type of thoughts, but they may not always proceed with the actual act itself, right? So when you were experiencing that, what was causing you to have those kind of thoughts at that point in time?
Well, so my longtime partner of over 20 years passed away. And after the widow's fog started to dissipate, about 18 months after he passed away, I got a work email that was on a scale of 1 to 10, it was a 1. But my nervous system, I think, had just had enough. And I interpreted this work email at a level 10 that I was going to lose my job. I was never going to be able to find another job. I was going to lose my house. I was going to be living in my car with, and at that point, I had a dog and a bird. Like, and all of that was going to happen in a month. You know, reality, reality, and I'm pointing to my head for those folks who are listening, reality versus what my body was experiencing. My body felt like the universe was out after me. I was running from a wild animal or something terrifying, and I was just in this hyper vigilant state. And after a couple of months of that, where nothing happened, but I was still in this really hyper state with my nervous system, I went back to my therapist that had worked with me with my grief work because she always let me pick up and put down therapy. And the talk therapy, to be quite frank, was not working. I had this trusted relationship and I was getting tired. And when you are constantly scared and you don't see any break in getting scared, that's when you question, or at least I questioned, why am I here? If this is what life is, if this is what life is now, I don't think I want to be here. And so that was my experience with getting closer and closer to suicidal behavior. I think what also feeds into it, my mother attempted suicide multiple times in her life. It wasn't this foreign thing that happened to other people. Like my mother's arms were a roadmap as to how I could slit my wrists. And so it was a very real thing. And when my therapist suggested this healing modality, I could have gone on and on for months theoretically, but I was getting closer and closer to just, if this is the way life is, I'm done, I'm out.
And I want to hone on that a little bit because I know sometimes some people who maybe they don't have the experience that you have when it comes to suicide or unaliving themselves or even self-deletion, they may ask, well, can't you just talk through it? Can't you just, right? Think of something positive. Can I just give you a hug? And it'll make it all better. But I think that what the disconnect is, at least from my observation, is that when you have those thoughts, it becomes potentially an option, right?
Mhm.
Where some people may think that, okay, if I'm having a bad day, these are my options. It's either I can try to focus on something else, I can busy my mind, I can go outside. Whereas someone who has those thoughts is, yes, I have those three things as my options, but my fourth is this, right? Would that be an accurate way to explain it?
I think that's an accurate way to explain it when you're looking at PTSD and suicide options from an intellectual perspective. And I'd like to throw out there the physical perspective. And when I say physical, I mean in the body. So there's a great book, The Body Keeps the Score by Vanderkolt, and he's online and things of that sort. I didn't believe my therapist when she argued with my therapist when she diagnosed me with PTSD. I was a corporate gal. I was killing it in every other part of my life. I was like, have you met me? I don't have PTSD. Well, she had me read this book. And what I learned is that my body's physical response to current events was really my body's learned response to trauma from way back when. I mean, like 30 years before. And so it's easy to say, mentally, come on, think your way out of it, do something else. But when your body, I want your audience to kind of think of something they know would really terrify them. A lot of people would be public speaking with like 1,000 people or jumping out of a plane, like how your body would start to feel. That's how a PTSD reaction very often feels. It might differ between people, like what actually they feel in their body, but their body gets upset, and that's what's really hard to ignore. You can't, unfortunately, we are not good at like outthinking our body, outthinking our trauma. There's a line, the issue is in the tissues. The issues are very rarely up here when it comes to PTSD. They're more realistically in the body. So it's a real challenge.
It is, and I think that's where probably a lot of people on the outside miss. They miss the physical. It's like I feel this way, right? Because it's one thing, right, to think, okay, I'm not having a good day. These are my options, which could include that. But I feel like going outside is not going to help. I feel like this isn't going to work. But this option here, it
What
doesn't
would
feel as
stop,
bad, right?
what would stop the body from hurting like that? Not being around anymore.
Yes, yes. So when you mention the PTSD,
Yeah.
for those who maybe, because as you mentioned, right, you're a corporate person, you're very successful, and you're like, have you met Jill? Me? Right? You know, have you met me? But you were going through it. And some people will look at you and be like, if she's able to go through this, and now here comes the comparison, right? I don't have what she has. I don't have maybe the happiness, the big smile, the big hair, right? I don't have these things. So does that mean that I could be going through it too? So how would you maybe help people identify if they're going through PTSD themselves?
You know what? I think that's a fantastic question, because we wouldn't have been able to have this conversation when I was in the midst of my PTSD. Everyone is seeing the highlight reel now. Everyone is seeing the after. And I can totally understand how people would look at me now chatting with you saying, oh, shouldn't have, what is she talking about? They didn't see the tears. They didn't see the year of kind of torment. It's really hard to go into your trauma. That's why I wound up writing the memoir about it, to really explain to people what this therapy is. For me, the signs of PTSD: constant rumination. I always thought I was kind of an anxious person. My long-term partner, Carl, he had kind of regulated my nervous system. So I was always able to kind of talk through things that would upset me, and having an empathic witness would always calm me down. So the rumination, the fear I've just kind of resolved a different kind of fear. I mean, my childhood was based on a domestic abuser who worked to make sure you were scared of him. And so there was always this level of fear, and this fear of making a mistake. And if I made a mistake, my heart rate would go up, my palms, like, and I think my entire life, my shoulders were up to my ears, like I was constantly tense. So what I say to folks is, when they're trying to say, well, how do I really know if I'm having a PTSD episode? Look to your body. Your body, if you can't actually calm your body down to go do something else, I would suggest you might be in a PTSD. I was calling it like a storm. I think there's a video where I called it like a PTSD storm, because that's how it kind of feels for me. It's this like tornado that I just can't